Now on the APEC VIP hotline, cutting-edge training for the serious athlete, apecgo.com. Joining us right now, the managing editor of Dave Campbell's Texas Football and texasfootball.com. It's Travis Stewart. How you doing, Travis?
I'm a little bit wonderful. How are you, Bryan?
A little bit wonderful. That's good. That's good. I wish you were a lot wonderful, but we'll take a little bit. Hey, let's talk a little bit about the last week of the regular season in college football and how all that shook out. First of all, I saw in your website where you were talking about coaches of the year and different kinds of awards, and you guys list Kevin Sumlin as the coach of the year in Texas as far as universities are concerned. And that had to be a tough choice when you think about the job that Art Briles did to rally his troops there late in the year. And the same goes for Gary Patterson when it gets right down to it.
And David Bailiff at Rice. I mean, talk about a team that was dead in the water. They rallied for 4 straight huge wins at the end of the season to get to bowl eligibility. So all 4 guys should really be in the conversation. And I guess Larry Coker at UTSA
True.
Finishing as well as they did in just their second year of ball. But when you're talking about how you play relative to your preseason expectations, and boy, that sounds like confirmation bias for me, I guess, but a big part of how a team gets viewed is what people expect them to do when the season begins. And I think we had A&M to be 7-5, and I think that was better than a lot of people had them faring in their first year in the SEC. But even we still undershot it. And not only did they win and win convincingly in a lot of games, Mississippi State most notably, they won in a way that gives you a confident feeling that this wasn't a fluke, that this wasn't just a one-year stand, so to speak, as a contender in the SEC, but as a chance to really be a power out there. And I think when you're talking about a coach who walks in his first year with a changing conference, with a first-time ever starter at quarterback, that's a pretty impressive coaching job. And, yeah, they've got a great offensive line. Yeah, they've got some great defensive players, and they had some obviously pieces of foundation already in place when he got there. But putting it all together and then running the ship with a freshman quarterback in the SEC is really hard to do. And the fact that they're 10-2, one of the best years in recent memory for them, all in their first year in what's supposed to be the toughest conference in America, sure is hard to pass them up, isn't it?
Oh, it's no question about it. He's done a great job, and it really makes you wonder, first of all, what was going on prior to that, because obviously Mike Sherman did a great job of recruiting, but it just didn't translate on the field.
And sometimes that's just a bad mix of things. But my interpretation was Sherman, beloved by the players. I think most of the guys really liked him. They were sad to see him go. But I think every time you see a coach come down a level, from pro to college, from college to high school, there is a certain drop-off in how you have to handle players. I think when you get to the pros, everyone is a professional, right? For the most part. There's obviously going to be some yahoos and some knuckleheads. But everyone's going to be a professional. And you expect a professional effort out of everybody from those guys. When you get down to the college level, you're still dealing with anywhere between 18 to 22-year-old kids. And those kids a lot of times have to have a fire lit underneath them. And I'm not saying that pros don't, but I think it's much more common with college kids. And then obviously motivation is 90% of the game down in high school. But in college, I think when Sherman came down, there was a certain amount of accountability that he expected from players that it doesn't always work to just expect it from college players. I think you need to light a fire under guys sometimes, and no one will tell you that Mike Sherman is not a man possessed with a certain competitive fire. I mean, Kevin Sumlin's not a man possessed with a certain competitive fire, which he clearly is. And I think that level of passion and that level of accountability he holds players to, I think it played out well for this team this year.
Oh, he did a terrific job. And so did Art Briles, who got a nice contract extension from Baylor yesterday. I mean, there didn't seem to be any chance he was leaving, but that appeared to be maybe the impetus behind giving him what he already really deserved, and that was a long-term contract extension.
Well, and that made sense for Baylor. I mean, they're obviously going to pay him a little more money, but when you think about the substantial investment they've made in athletics as of late, and now particularly the new stadium that they're building, which I'm really excited about. I mean, you got to put butts in the seats to pay for that thing, and that's just the way that typically works. Hey, your donors put a lot of money out, but they want to see return on investment by people sitting in the stands. And while it would be unfair to say that what Art Briles has built would be undone with his departure, I think that there is history in the books that suggests that Baylor right now is in a special place that they have not been in Big 12 memory, and Art Briles has been a major part of making that happen. So just like I've said that I think if Gary Patterson were to walk away from TCU, it would be a very damaging blow towards their competitive hopes, both in the short term and possibly in the long term. I think Art Briles fits that bill too. So Baylor is almost at the point that whatever he needs, you almost kind of have to give it to him because of what he's become to that program and all of the surrounding parts to it.
Well, when you think about how down that program was from the time that Grant Taft retired until Bryles came aboard, I mean, it was in a complete graveyard.
And it's not just like any coach off the street's going to come fix that, evidenced by the fact that many coaches came in off the street and didn't fix it. And then look around the country at how many schools are just essentially playing roulette with coaches. They're all trading second-hand coaches. They're getting a retread. They're moving through guys hoping someone hits lightning in a bottle. That happens all over America. And I've said this for years about college football. The worst place to be is not bad. The worst place to be is being irrelevant, where you're stuck in a cycle where you just essentially don't matter, where you're not horrible, but you're obviously not great. You're just stuck in the middle where you can't lure anybody big. You can't even give it the sell. You can't even tell a coach on it being a rebuilding project where he'll have total control. You're just irrelevant. South Carolina was there forever, and they've obviously turned their ship around with Steve Spurrier there. But Baylor, the worst thing they could be would just be simply irrelevant. And Art Briles has given them a storyline. He's given them an objective. He's given them a face, as Robert Griffin did too. But he's given them a face that they haven't had you right since Grant Taft left, and you can't expect Art to walk out the door and for that face to stay intact.
Now, Texas is not irrelevant yet, but they can't keep having seasons like they had this year. I know at this point it doesn't look like Mack Brown's going to be going anywhere, but Jake Shaw mentioned that that's probably not true about his staff. What kind of things do you anticipate happening there?
I don't know. I've wondered that myself, and Jake obviously had a big statement there, and he may end up proving correct, but I'm not positive as to what changes may go on there. Obviously, the defense was bad, and they were good sometimes, but for the most part, they just weren't very good. And that's obviously going to put some heat on Manny Diaz. But at the same time, he runs a linebacker-heavy system, and they were very, very short on linebackers, partially because some of their recruiting classes have busted, but also because they had some injuries, most notably to Jordan Hicks. So I think if they wanted to walk him in and get rid of him, it'd be a tough sell because he's got some extenuating circumstances he could sit down and talk about. Now, some of the support staff, I don't know. Whenever you have a bad season, especially at a school like Texas, where bad seasons are never acceptable, you're not even allowed to have rebuilding there for the most part. Well, you got to find someone. You got to find somewhere to place some blame, and I'm not going to say who or where it should belong to because I think the only people inside locker rooms can really tell that. But maybe the most frustrating thing about it for Texas over these past, Bryan, I guess we can say 3 years now, huh?
Yep.
Really over these past 3 years, has been, I feel like fans especially, but a lot of people are just kind of searching for the magic bullet, and there just isn't one. There's a lot of little things that need to be fixed, a lot of little things that need to be changed. I don't think it's as easily simplified down as to just one big thing that you can cure with, as I said, a magic bullet.
One of the things that seems to be a common thread with Mack's teams ever since he's gotten there is he's either hitting a home run with a quarterback in Vince Young or Colt McCoy, or it's been complete bust for the most part. I mean, really, he's sitting here right now, third year in a row now, where his quarterback situation's not settled. And you talked about it a few minutes ago when you talked about recruiting classes not being what they thought they were going to be. I mean, what do you do to fix that? I mean, that comes down to something much deeper than just coaching X's and O's. That's talent evaluation. And, I mean, where do you find a guy that can do that job for you?
This is probably not what I would call a popular opinion, but here's the best way I can describe it. You never know how a kid's going to develop, obviously, and you never know exactly how he's going to project to the next level. But I've been watching enough football that I can usually make a pretty good determination or a pretty good comparison between quarterbacks. I watched Garrett Gilbert play a ton in high school. I watched Johnny Manziel play a ton in high school. I watched Andrew Luck play a little bit in high school. He was finishing up right as I was just starting here at this brand. I'm telling you, Garrett Gilbert was every bit the guy that those were in high school, and not just as, a high school quarterback, he can get a 5-yard hitch and a 10-yard out and all the little things that high school kids have to do. He was playing at a level of those guys. I mean, he was that good, and you could tell that talent would project, and he got there, and obviously it fell apart. Got a little better at SMU, but not a whole lot. And I watched David Ash play a ton at Belton. Really talented kid, a little more, wasn't quite as polished as Garrett was, but the talent was obviously there. It's when it's getting there, it's really not rounding in a form, which makes me think it's more of a talent development issue, which is surprising because I would consider Colt, who came from a 3A program, and Vince, who came from a 5A program that they didn't really know how to throw the football, much like you do in college. Those were definitely project guys. So they got to campus, they really developed those guys into some great quarterbacks, and those kids worked hard on their own. But these past couple guys who seemed like more slam dunks didn't pan out. So I think to some extent, yeah, maybe you should read other team scouting reports, I guess is the best way to handle it. Maybe there's some of that. But once you get a guy on campus, you got to turn him into something. And looking at Malcolm Brown, their running back, yeah, he's been banged up. But, I mean, that was a slam dunk college guy in high school. Everyone agreed on it, and when you see him, you still know he's got the talent there, but they haven't been able to put the pieces together for him either. It almost seems like they're having a hard time developing kids more than they are picking out the good ones.
Well, does that mean that's at the feet of Bryan Harsin?
That's a tough call. Here's one of the most puzzling moments of the year for me, and it could have been an incorrect statement, but I was watching a Texas game. I can't remember which one it was, and the color commentary guy, who I will leave nameless, said that Bryan Harsin was telling his quarterbacks, namely David Ash, to underthrow the ball on deep throws, because that way when the receiver comes back for the ball, you can draw a pass interference call on that. That's the way he was teaching that play. That made my head explode, because I've never heard of a coach teaching a quarterback to do that. As a matter of fact, the only thing I've ever heard is if you ever make a mistake, you overthrow it, where it can't be intercepted. And that really threw me for a loop, and it made me think one of two things is happening. This color guy got his facts wrong, which could be happening. He could be, what he meant to have said maybe was you underthrow it on this particular route pattern. Who knows? Or they've just got some relatively new, perhaps innovative, but perhaps just simply bizarre ways of talking to kids and coaching up kids and changing the way they do things that maybe it's just not working. Bryan Harsin was very successful at Boise State, obviously.
Yeah.
But if that's the kind of stuff they're teaching, it may be innovative, and I may be behind simply on football trends. But that to me just sounds weird.
Yeah, that sounds very bizarre. That's very strange. Okay, and then this weekend, I mean, is there any way that Johnny Manziel does not win the Heisman Trophy?
Yeah, I think so, because there are simply people out there, and God knows, Brian, I've read it and seen it already just this week, who will flat out tell you to your face that they don't want to give it to a freshman.
It's crazy.
And I know, but how large of a contingency that is will largely decide this. Here was the most unbelievable moment for me so far in this Heisman going. One of our neighboring states, I will again leave nameless, they had a 4-writer panel talk about who they were going to vote for the Heisman. I don't think any of these guys have Heisman votes, so this is pure punditry, I guess, at this point. But they had the 3 finalists, and all of them had Teo first, and 3 of them had Johnny third.
Wow.
Which made me shake my head, not having Teo first, because he's very worthy, I think, of being a Heisman guy. I would vote for Johnny, but I think Teo is very worthy of being a Heisman guy. But having Johnny third is just a blatant dodging of Johnny. You just don't want to give it to him either because he's a freshman or, I don't know, whatever. But depending on how large of a contingency out there that will literally cover their ears and shake their head and say, no, I won't do it, if that's a large enough group, he won't win it.
That would be a crime.
I kind of agree. I think he was the most impactful player on the field. I don't know if he was the best player I saw all year. Teo was really darn good. So was Klein. But I think he was the most impactful to his team this year. And granted, it's a subjective opinion, but it would be very difficult to stomach if people were putting him somehow third. That truly would be a crime, not because Klein's not worthy, but because Johnny's that worthy of being number 1, at the very least number 2. I think he'll win. Let me caveat. I think he'll win, and he should win. But I worry there's people out there who will, as I said earlier, cover their eyes and shake their head and say, no, I won't do it.
Okay. High school football, we've got 3 weeks left in the season. Things are starting to develop now. You're starting to see who the really great teams are. If you were paying to see one game this weekend, which game would you think you'd go to see?
In high school rank?
Yeah.
I would, luckily I don't have to pay for high school games anymore, but sometimes I do have to pay for parking. But I would go with DeSoto and South Lake Carroll. I'm still stuck a week behind. I would go with DeSoto and South Lake Carroll, with all due respect to Navasota and West Orange Start, because I simply just don't know where to go mentally in that Carroll-DeSoto game. I don't know who you lean to. Both sides' defenses are truly spectacular. You have arguably the 2 top players in the Metroplex, if not all of Texas, in Carroll quarterback Kenny Hill and DeSoto running back Dontre Wilson. And I think whoever walks out of there is going to end up winning that state title unless they're just so beaten up from this weekend's game that they run out of gas. But Those are two epically good teams, and maybe that's probably too strong. Those are two extremely good teams. When you put them together, you have one of the best games in recent playoff memory in the Metroplex for sure.
Great games. We've got two here in East Texas that are rematches. Henderson-Gilmer was a terrific game when they played back in October, and they're playing again in Longview, and it's two district rivals in a rematch. I mean, it's like two sledgehammers going against each other right now.
Yeah, the popular football platitude is it's tough to beat the same football team twice in 1 year, and time again that's proven to be true. So in a bit of sound logic, I'll go completely against it and say Gilmer beats them again. Because honestly, I just think Gilmer's a better team. Henderson's a really good football team, but I think Gilmer is a legitimate state finalist kind of group. Their history obviously speaks for itself, and Coach Traylor's history obviously speaks for itself. I think Gilmer's your better team there, but I bet you Henderson makes it as close a game as you're going to find in this fourth round.
And the other game is Dangerfield and New Boston. New Boston won that game 38-37 back on October the 5th, and so I'm guessing that it's going to be just like that again.
Yeah, this may actually be a game where you see the flip side of it happen. I picked New Boston to win. I think they will, but I recognize and salute the fact that Dangerfield has improved throughout the year. Their offense has come along, their defense has come along, they're getting better, and I'll be darned if they may not be the equal, if not the better, in New Boston this week. And New Boston fans are chucking stuff at the radio. I'm sorry, and they're tired of losing to Dangerfield. Everyone is. But I think these Tigers are going to give them a heck of a run, and they may walk out of there with an upset win.
What's going on with the website and the magazine now?
Well, now we're starting to buckle down for the Winter Magazine, which will come out right about February 1st. And we'll do most of our postseason look-back stuff. We're going to put an emphasis on some off-season look ahead this year in that magazine. We'll move most of the recruiting to online stuff, which will be kind of a special edition partner to it. We'll probably talk more about that as we get closer to it. But most importantly, this year we're going to make a shift, and this will be more of a collectible. This is going to be more of a special edition. There'll be some more collectible items involved in the magazine, maybe some elements that we'll talk about again when we get a little bit closer to it. But this will be a different style. This isn't just going to be a magazine you buy on the rack. This is more of a coffee table book, I think, heading forward.
Cool. Sounds great. Hey, Travis, thanks very much for talking with us today, and we'll talk to you next week.
Anytime, I'll be here.
All right, Travis Stewart, Dave Campbell's Texas Football and TexasFootball.com on Bryan Houston Sports Radio Live on 99.3 Talk FM.